Look, this is a story of how I read a book so emotional that got me in a massive reading slump, and how I surrounded myself with amazing short, action-packed adult fantasy books and a little bit of fantasy romance to get me out of that reading slump. But let's start this story from the beginning, because in August, the Aurelian cycle, an incredible dragon riders, politics, forbidden love kind of vibe story was concluded. In order to prepare myself for that, I reread book 2, Flamefall. And things were more or less alright. I remember the pain. But already, when I was reading it, I started blending it with magic steeped in poison. This was actually an incredible cozy read, something that really energized me. And it's this kind of story that you want to get to read because you want to feel good. It talks about this girl that is able to perform magic through the tea that she prepares, and because her mom died due to a special tea that she brewed, and her sister is very ill, she will need to start these trials of becoming the greatest tea master of the empire. There was a little bit of insta-love, which I'm not a huge fan of, and also miscommunication, so really not my favorite tropes, but this setting and everything that surrounded this cozy story really made me to just finish it and pre-order book 2. So let's say then that I was in a pretty good mood. I was prepared for Fury Song, but boy oh boy, this book delivered, and it delivered in a way that made me sob so hard. It's that kind of book, like my eyes. And although I thought the pacing was a little bit slower, overall the story was concluded very, 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 very nicely. But as you can imagine, after reading a series that is truly phenomenal, what is to be read afterwards? So what I did is to read a book by an author that I discovered not so long ago, and I read Sorcery of Thorns. This promised to be a mysterious, action-packed standalone that had a little bit of humor and sometimes a little bit of dark themes. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. So much happened all of the time. I was almost tired, but at the same time, because it was so quick paced, so plot driven, I was like, okay, I'm never bored. And although predictable at times, this is a story that really got me cracking a smile. In a nutshell, it talks about our girl that has grown up in a library, and she has taken the place of really taking care of the different books of the grimoires, because those books can become alive and do bad stuff. And so one day something terrible happens, and our girl Elizabeth will be expelled from this library, and she will follow a sorcerer called Nathaniel to the city, and she will understand a little bit of a trial. The magic system was also really interesting. Although it's soft, it brought a topic that I thought was really unique, which is, in order for these sorcerers to perform magic, they need to call upon a demon, and they steal this magic, they channel this magic from the demons. I gave Sorcery of Thorns a 4.5. Let's say then that I was like, I had this book, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to keep reading, and that's when I picked Spiderlight. This is the standalone that it's very short. It's a quest, Dungeons and Dragons kind of story by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it really is like Kings of the Wild, but for me it was even better. It was such a fun, quick, and to the point book. It tells a story that we have heard before. It's a story about the bad that it's ruling and how the good ones are about to defeat it. And so these people have come together and they are starting this quest, very Lord of the Ringy like, to defeat this great evil. This was surprisingly a reflexive book for me. Like, it was super fast. They do all of the journey in just a little bit less than 300 pages. And there are two things that I really loved, and one thing that I was like, why Adrian? Just why? The first thing that I loved is that we see different characters, 6 of them, but we won't have a chapter for each of the characters, but rather a chapter for each of the adventures, more or less. But in each chapter, we will see how the different characters are thinking, what are they feeling. The second thing is humor. Really, this little thief stole the show for me. Maybe not a humor for everyone, it's definitely dark, but if you like dark humor, this is such a book for you. And then the thing that is like, why, Adrian, you're always doing this stuff, it's like the spiders. I ended up rating this book with 4 stars, and after reading it, I was like, okay, I am ready, although I must confess I am a little bit tired mentally, and that's precisely the moment when I picked Legends and Lattes. Honestly, this adult fantasy standalone, when you share the peach, is like, and then what? We have this ogre that was a warrior, and now she wants to retire from that life and she wants to open a coffee shop. And that's that, like, that's the story. But how you get to know the characters, and especially the coziness that surrounds you while reading it, was unreal. Like, it's defined as high fantasy with low stakes, and that sounded completely weird to me, but now it was so relaxing, so refreshing. It's something that I'm now like, this is one of my favorites. It does not make sense. Against all odds, I also rated this book with 4.5 stars. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I feel that I've read a fair share of books already. I'm surviving my reading slump, but you know, something was amiss. Like, I did not know what I was missing, and so I added to the mix this fantasy romance because it was like, I need to spice things up. I read A King So Cold. I actually went to the whole duology and I read it straight. And so let me tell you something. This was spicy. I don't believe that it's something that we find as much in adult fantasy. And so when I started, like, first paragraph, it's already spicy. Like, there's people already, like, getting it done. So it was like, okay, expectations set. It's about this queen that at the moment of her wedding, she gets betrayed by her husband, and this husband gets expelled. His memories are erased, but one day she hears that her husband is about to get married again, and she's like, no. And she retrieves him, and she starts retelling the story of how they met and how he ruined her life. I believe this is the book that has the best love triangle that I've read. It does not have a lot of world building. I ended up giving this 4 stars. After these, I was like, whew, I'm not sure, like, too much. Let's go to something that is a little bit more happy, and that's the moment when I get to The Legend of Black Jack. It took me like 30% of the book to get to the feelings of this book, and that's why I rated this with 4.5 stars. Maybe it was because it was so fast, so plot driven, that my tired little old brain was like, relax. In a nutshell, we'll talk about this guy that it's a little bit of a prodigy. His dad really grooms him, and together they create these amazing stories, kind of like Indiana Jones kind of stories. And then something terrible happened, and we pick this story like 7 years afterwards. And one day, a rhino will take our guy and take him into this world. Really is a blend of all of those different stories that you might have read when you were a child, and overall it felt so whimsical, so hopeful. It's at the same time a little bit emotional, and then I was like, okay, this was again a little bit tiring. Let's get to something that it's easy. And that's when I got to another fantasy romance, which is What Lies Beyond the Veil. This promised to be a story perfect for lovers of From Blood and Ash and A Court of Thorns and Roses. Honestly, it has such a good premise. I just don't know what happened. Ended up giving it like 3 stars. We will talk about this world where before they were ruled by the Fae, and so the mages came together and they stopped this Fae rising up, this veil that separates both people. And then one day the veil falls. It was so predictable. I usually think that when you read something that it's really predictable, the author usually just says it out flat so that you know that it's something that the character also knows and the author knows that you know, and you know there's something else like hidden. And in this book I was all of the time like, no, for sure there's like more things, you know, there's something, but no. And because I was hurt and damaged, I read the first one of Heartstoppers. I actually did not know much. I have not watched the Netflix series yet, and although everyone raved about this, I was like, meh, maybe too young for me. And it definitely is young, but it's such a sweet and cozy story. It put me back like into these, okay, you believe in books. Books are great, can make you feel things, and the things that you can feel are also good things. This is a kind of book where you are constantly expecting something bad to happen, or, you know, the miscommunication trope to be let there, but it's not. I gave it 4 stars and I loved it. I really believe the majority of all of these books will help you as well to get out of a reading slump. But let me know down below if you have any book that you know will get other people out. If you are looking for reads that are very quick, I will link down below in the description a list of books that has a little bit less than 350 pages.